Ash fell like dead snow over the ruins of Outpost Helion. Captain Cale Riven's boots crunched against scorched ferrocrete, his exosuit humming in low-energy reserve mode. The remains of his platoon were scattered through the wreckage, buried under plasma-scorched rubble and twisted alloy. He hadn't spoken in hours, hadn't needed to. His squad's vitals had all flatlined simultaneously during the Krivari orbital bombardment. The silence since then had been worse than the artillery. His HUD flickered with static as he passed under the fractured remains of a collapsed command gantry. Fractures spidered across his visor. Red warnings pulsed along the edges of his tactical display. Oxygen low, hydration critical, left leg servo failure imminent. Still he moved forward, following a faint energy signature spiking beneath the debris of a collapsed biotech wing. Something alive was down there. It didn't make sense. Krivari didn't leave survivors. They didn't take prisoners. And they sure as hell didn't power med bays after cleansing an outpost. But there it was, readings weak but undeniably biological. He adjusted his plasma rifle and limped down a shattered corridor reeking of smoke ozone and the faint copper tang of spilled blood. The source was just beyond a mangled blast door, half fused, still warm. He braced his shoulder against the warped metal and pushed. Inside was a containment chamber, glassed in, cracked, humming, low with residual charge. A single pod remained active in the corner of the room. Vines of black conduit snaked from wall panels to the pod's rear, flickering with dying light. And inside, suspended in pale blue stasis light, floated the last thing he expected. A Virellin. She was unmistakable emerald skin, bruised to near violet, the luminous biolattice lines across her neck dim with exhaustion. Her hair, a silvery braid tied in Virellin healer's fashion, drifted around her face like silk underwater. Her chest rose shallowly. Barely. Her vitals registered unstable. Enemy his training whispered. But then her eyes fluttered open. Golden irises, dilated, glazed with pain but conscious. They stared at each other, separated by 2 inches of stasis glass and an eternity of war. Her lips parted, but no sound came through. Only her eyes moved wide, disoriented and not pleading. Just watching him. The pod's life support levels ticked downward. Another few hours, maybe less. Cale didn't know what made him do it. Maybe it was the wreckage around them, proof that politics meant nothing, when survival was the only currency left. Maybe it was the way she didn't scream, didn't recoil, didn't flinch at a human face staring back. Or maybe it was something older, something buried deep in the code of all soldiers who've crawled from wreckage alone, the need to save something, anything, just to feel human again. He set down his rifle. All right, he muttered to no one, pulling out his field override kit. Let's be stupid. The security grid rejected his access code, but a well-placed pulse detonation to the panel yielded sparks and a satisfying hiss. The stasis glass depressurized, slowly cracking open like a mechanical chrysalis. Her body sagged as support systems disengaged, and Cale caught her mid-fall. She was lighter than expected. Cold. Skin slick with stasis gel. He laid her on the floor and wrapped her in his thermal cloak. Her eyes opened again. This time her pupils focused. She breathed in, sharply winced. Her body jerked, convulsing once before her arms wrapped instinctively around herself. Easy, Cale said softly. You're safe. A stupid thing to say. The entire quadrant was burning. His own extraction was 3 systems away. And he'd just given aid to a Virellin technically committing treason under Intergalactic Military Code 3.2.7. Still, she didn't resist. He activated his translator unit. Can you understand me? Her voice came as a whisper, halting and low. Yes. What's your name? Pause. Then Niari. She shivered. Cale did his best to adjust the cloak around her shoulders. Her biolattice patterns flared slightly where his fingers brushed skin, a low glow pulsing like fireflies underwater. You're injured. Niari nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Abdomen, ribs, bionode breach. Cale scanned her with his med patch. Readings confirmed it. Internal bleeding. Energy regulation collapse. A normal human would be dead. You're going to need stabilizers, he muttered. I know. Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling. But you can't carry both of us far. Cale looked at her, then looked at the broken door, the flashing red hazard signs, the seismic instability warning. And he realized he didn't care. I'm not leaving you here. He lifted her, carefully adjusting the cloak and redistributing weight. She didn't protest, only inhaled softly, each breath laced with pain but no longer fear. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The building groaned beneath them as another distant impact shockwave hit. Dust shook from the ceiling like falling ash. Then in a voice so quiet it nearly didn't register, she said, "No human has ever touched me like that." Kale blinked. Like what? Without hate. It wasn't gratitude. It was just a fact. As simple as the ruins around them. As simple as the silence between explosions. He adjusted his grip. "Well, I'm not most humans." "No," Nyari whispered. "You're not." He carried her into the fire-lit dusk footsteps, vanishing into the smoke, unaware that what had started as a reckless rescue would become the catalyst for a change neither of their species could yet imagine. The firestorms came in waves. Kael ducked beneath a jagged steel beam, his muscles screaming with effort as he shielded Nyari from the falling embers. The makeshift shelter and overturned hover tank, half buried in slag, offered only marginal protection from the collapsing skyline. Still, it was the best they had for now. He set her down gently on the charred earth, checking her vitals again. Her skin glowed faintly where the biolattice patterns flared along her collarbone, but the energy signature was flickering erratic. The bleeding had slowed, though her breathing remained shallow. "You're going into node shock," Kale murmured mostly to himself. "You need a proper stabilization pod." Nyari opened one eye. Her voice was strained but dry with faint amusement. "Well, if you see one nearby, do let me know." Kale huffed a laugh despite himself. Guess sarcasm is universal. Guess idiotic bravery is a human trait. "Part of the survival package," he said, pressing a med-seal patch to her side. She winced, but made no sound. "Why did you do it?" she asked after a pause. He didn't answer right away. He checked the horizon, just smog and the silhouette of broken towers. Then quietly, "Because I've watched too many people die. And I figured if I was going to ignore orders and disappear into a crater, I might as well take someone interesting with me." Nyari blinked at him, her expression unreadable. Then softly, "That's the worst pickup line I've ever heard." Kale smirked. "I've been out of practice." They rested in uneasy silence, sharing the heat of the thermal cloak, watching the clouds pulse orange with distant detonations. The wind carried the scent of ionized metal and ozone, but beneath that, Kael noticed something stranger. The scent of crushed leaves, faintly floral. It was coming from her. "Do all Virellans smell like that?" he asked, tilting his head. "Like what? Like spring if it had a nervous system." Her eyes narrowed. "You're smelling my endocrine emissions. It's involuntary." Kael raised an eyebrow. "You're leaking pheromones." "It's a healing response. My body's trying to regulate the damage. And no, it's not intended for you." "Shame. I was flattered." She shook her head, lips twitching. "You humans really are strange. Strange enough to risk my life for you." Nyari looked away, her voice quieter. "No one's ever done that for me before." They moved again at twilight. Kael fashioned a sling from the remains of a shredded glider harness, securing her against his back. Her arms wrapped loosely around his chest as he scaled a slope of fractured glasscrete. With every step, the burnt-out husk of Outpost Helion shrank behind them. As they trudged through the ruins, she asked questions. What was Earth like? What did sunset feel like through a breathable atmosphere? Did his people always joke so much in war zones? He answered them all, sometimes with a smirk, sometimes with hesitation. She seemed especially fascinated by his description of oceans. When he described the sound of waves crashing over dark sand, he felt her body shift, pressing in closer, as if she were trying to hear the memory through him. What does it feel like, she asked, when salt water hits your skin? Kael thought for a moment. Like being punched by something that loves you. Nyari laughed, a sound that startled him with its clarity. It was melodic, almost crystalline, and completely out of place in the rubble around them. Virellans don't laugh during combat, she said after the moment passed. You're not in combat anymore. Aren't we? He didn't have an answer to that. Later, they found a half-intact transport station buried beneath the sand. The power was dead, but the structure held walls of alloy and quartz, shielding them from the growing wind. Kael laid Nyari down against a bench padded with old coats, then dug through the compartments for anything useful. He returned with 2 ration packs and a cracked bottle of electrolyte fluid. Nyari sniffed the ration bar suspiciously. This smells like something that died on purpose. Kael chewed without flinching. That's because it probably did. She took a hesitant bite and grimaced. I've committed war crimes less severe than this texture. Kael choked on a laugh. I'll file a protest with the chefs back home. They shared the rest in silence. chewing slowly, watching the wind stir dust through cracks in the walls. Nyari leaned her head back, her skin gleaming faintly in the dim light. Kale noticed that the biolattice around her ribcage had stabilized, no longer pulsing wildly, but instead glowing in slow, rhythmic waves. "You're recovering. My systems are compensating, but it's temporary. I still need alignment." Alignment. Our bionodes sync with central harmonic cores, part of our architecture. Without that, my energy will begin to unravel. Then we find one. Nyari looked at him. "You don't even know what it looks like. Doesn't matter. If it can help you, we're finding it." She studied him for a long time. Then very softly, "Why do you care so much?" Kael didn't answer at first. He leaned back against the cold wall, eyes half-lidded. "Because something about this war stopped making sense. A long time ago," he said. "And I don't know what this is between us, but it's the first thing that feels like it might matter." A long pause. Then her hand touched his, fingers barely grazing just enough to feel the warmth of skin. Her biolattice flickered brighter at the contact. "It does matter," she whispered. Outside, the wind howled through the bones of a dead city. Inside, for the first time in days, the silence was warm. They found the chamber by accident. The next day, Kael followed Nyari's faint guidance toward what she described as a resonance vault, a place once used by her people for deep healing and neural rebalancing. But what they found was something older, stranger, and alive in ways that made Kael's tactical display glitch with static. A crystalline vault, half submerged beneath the ground, shimmered beneath layers of ash and dust. Tendrils of iridescent alloy arched upward like fossilized trees curving into geometric spirals. Runes glowed faintly across the entryway symbols from a language neither of them could fully translate. As they stepped inside, a low harmonic hum filled the air. Nyari gasped, her knees buckling. Kael caught her before she fell. "It's active," she breathed. "The harmonic core is intact." The inner chamber resembled no medical bay Kael had ever seen. No sterile light, no steel slabs. Instead, bioluminescent flora pulsed along the walls, and at the center, a pod made of translucent shell throbbed with a slow, organic rhythm. Its form was both mechanical and biological, part sarcophagus, part heartbeat. Nyari touched its edge, her biolattice flaring in synchrony. "It's a symbiotic interface. It reacts to genetic signatures. And will it heal you?" Her gaze faltered. "Only if calibrated to virulent patterns. And I'm compromised. I've bonded to human energy, yours." Kael frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means this pod may not accept me alone." A pause. The hum grew louder, more insistent. "Then what do we do?" Her answer came with difficulty. "We enter it together." Kael blinked. "You're saying I have to get in that thing?" "It's not a machine," she said softly. "It's a resonance vessel. It links bioelectric fields, balances cell decay, enhances restorative harmonics. But it can only function through alignment." Alignment. Our frequencies have to become one. The implications settled in the silence between them. "Side effects?" he asked. Nyari hesitated. "Genetic syncing, neural echo, possible permanent fusion at the energetic level." He stared at her. "You're telling me we might merge?" "Not completely, but deeply." A slow breath passed between them. "Will it save you?" "Yes." Kael didn't need more than that. The pod opened like a blooming flower. Soft light poured from within, warm pulsing, somehow intimate. Nyari stepped inside first, her body trembling with weakness, but guided by purpose. Kael followed, his armor creaking as he lowered himself beside her. The moment their skin touched shoulder to shoulder, palm to palm, the pod reacted. Energy surged around them, violet and blue, shimmering like a living aurora. Biolattice lines across Nyari's body reached toward Kael like veins of light, finding his own pulse sinking. His own nervous system spasmed for a moment, but not in pain, something between ticklish and overwhelming. The pod sealed around them in silence. His vision exploded with memory. Not his, hers. Flash images poured through his mind, childhood under twin moons, the sacred pools of cerebral meditations in zero-gravity gardens. He saw her mother's face, felt her first heartbeat during training, her terror during the first human warship encounter, and then, him. The moment she saw him through stasis glass, the strange electric sense of being seen by something she'd been raised to fear. His chest tightened. Then came his own memories offered freely. Earth. Thunderstorms. The call of gulls over ocean cliffs. His father's final mission. The way his fingers trembled the first time he held a weapon. They shared it all. Words weren't necessary. Their minds floated on overlapping resonance waves. Each thought a touch, each memory a brush of skin. The chamber amplified everything, turning neural sparks into rivers, instinct into song. And through it all, something deeper unfurled beyond biology, beyond species. Connection, fusion, emotion curled around them like warm silk. Kale felt her breath catch as his hand slid along the curve of her ribs. Not just contact, but a merging of pulses. Their bodies weren't just pressed together. They were speaking in frequencies no voice could replicate. Then the energy deepened. A golden light flared between them. Her biolattice fully ignited, glowing like a constellation. Kyle gasped, feeling the rush of power move from her into him, then loop back, amplified. Their hearts beat in tandem. Their nerves sang in harmony. Every scar, every crack in their bodies or spirits closed together. They didn't know how long it lasted. When the pod finally opened, the light subsided. They emerged wrapped in sweat and breath skin, glowing faintly, hair clinging to damp foreheads. Their hands remained entwined. Kale stared at Nyari, her eyes no longer dim but brilliant. The bruises were gone, her posture strong. But more than that, she felt different. Alive, full, whole. "You're healed," he whispered. "And you?" She looked at him awed. "You're resonating." Kyle opened his HUD. No alerts, no failures. In fact, every biometric reading was elevated. Strength, cognition, cellular regeneration. His left leg, once partially crippled, moved with full range. "What did we do?" he asked. Nyari touched her stomach. For a moment, she said nothing. Then something unprecedented. Kale followed her gaze. His eyes widened. The pulse beneath her palm was not hers alone. "What does it mean?" She smiled slowly, uncertain, radiant, terrified. "It means we didn't just align, Kale. We created something new." The storm greeted them as they emerged from the vault. Lightning streaked across the red sky, scattering ash like fireflies. The ground trembled as distant artillery lit the horizon. Human and Kravari forces clashing again, blind to what had just awakened in the earth beneath them. Kale stood taller than before. His senses had changed. His breath came easier. His hearing sharpened, picking up harmonics in the wind pulses and the soil heartbeats from creatures far off in the rubble. His movements felt smoother, each step in sync with Nyari's. Even without looking, he could feel her posture shift, her breath tighten, her energy flare. They were no longer just two beings. They were tuned. A squad of recon drones swept low over the ridge as they ascended from the vault. Kyle pulled Nyari behind a collapsed arch, but she stopped him with a hand. "I can redirect them," she whispered. Her fingers brushed the vault's interface node, now dormant, and the biolattice along her wrist shimmered. A soft hum escaped her palm, an emitted frequency, neither mechanical nor vocal. The drones paused. One blinked red, then veered off course. The others followed, disappearing into the haze. Kale blinked. "You did that." "No," she corrected. "We did that." As the truth settled between them, so did something else, a gnawing certainty. They were not safe. The fusion they had triggered in the healing pod was more than a medical procedure. It had altered them. Her cellular systems had accepted human DNA not just passively, but adaptively. And his body in return had begun to produce faint echoes of Varellan energy pulses, hints of biolattice structures where none should exist. They were becoming something new, and something new was always dangerous. At the edge of the valley, a Kravari tactical outpost glowed dim through the smoke. Kale recognized the framework, modular shield generators, concussive turrets, and a command relay. His HUD pinged Secure Zone Alpha 3, enemy occupied but recently abandoned by frontline squads. If they moved fast, they could scavenge intel, or use the uplink. They made their way through craters and debris. Kale, leading with plasma rifle, raised Nyari at his side, her movements light and strangely graceful for someone who'd nearly died 2 days prior. At the gate, 2 Kravari sentries lay slumped, still breathing, but comatose vines of dark residue wrapped around their limbs. Kale checked their pulses. "Neural disruption," Nyari murmured. They were exposed to harmonics. "Our harmonics," she didn't answer. They moved inward. The outpost shimmered with broken tech screens, sparking scanners fried. At the central node, Kale tapped into the comms log. Static. Then faint signals, broadcasts looping in panic. The messages weren't about human incursions. They were about them. Unknown resonance event detected. Non-standard biological presence confirmed. Recommendation quarantine protocol. Kale's chest tightened. "They're tracking us." "Not just us," Nyari said, eyes widening. "They're tracking it." Her hand drifted to her abdomen. The energy there pulsed in response. Not as a heartbeat, as a signal. Kale froze. You're saying the fusion transmitted? Nyari nodded slowly. And it's still transmitting. The implications hit like a railgun. Their child, whatever it was becoming, was emitting an energy signature powerful enough to be felt across factions, across battle lines. It was no longer just a biological fluke. It was a beacon. They had to move. Outside, Kravari scouts were closing in. The outpost shields flickered, failing. Without speaking, Kale grabbed Nyari's hand. Their energy fields surged at the contact. No static, no friction. Just clean synchronization like two currents joining one stream. She activated a control panel. Her biolattice flared, interfacing directly. The platform behind them unlocked, revealing a cache of dormant tech. Alien weapons, human gear, hybrid prototypes. Kale's fingers brushed across the weapon rack. His pulse matched the hum of the plasma edge blade. The weapon lit up in his grip. You're resonating with it, Nyari whispered. He turned the blade. It's responding to both of us. She stepped beside him and laid her hand on the power core. A shimmering sheath of energy wrapped the weapon, amplified, stabilized. The readings climbed. The system was drawing from their shared frequency. Together they had become the key to new warfare. Kravari soldiers poured over the ridge. Too late. Kyle moved first, his body reading enemy trajectories before they appeared. He didn't need to look. He felt their intent, as if Nyari's awareness fed directly into his own. Each step, each strike, each shot landed not just with precision, but with understanding. Nyari's hands danced with arcs of bioplasmic light. She pulsed energy outward not as an attack, but as a counterbalance. Every shot Kale took, she reinforced. Every wound he might have taken, she dampened. They fought as one. The Kravari never stood a chance. As the last of the soldiers fell stunned or neutralized, Kyle and Nyari stood in the ruins of the outpost, breath-synchronized energy shimmering like heat waves around them. Then silence. They hadn't spoken once during the fight. They hadn't needed to. Their bond was no longer theoretical, no longer just an accident in a healing pod. It was now battlefield doctrine, and the galaxy already watching had no idea what was coming next. Night on Ciraval wasn't quiet. Even in the ruins of war, the twin moons sang resonance echoes, vibrating through the crystalline upper atmosphere, creating light shows across the sky. Some said it was the planet weeping, others said it was remembering. Tonight it was listening. Across fractured mesas and broken exofields, two armies gathered, one human, the other Kravari. Between them, a no-man's land of scarred terrain and minefields patrolled by drones that hadn't yet received the latest updates. And in the middle of it all, Kyle and Nyari. Word had spread first as rumor, then report, then tactical priority. An unauthorized healing resonance event. Genetic cross-linking. Weapon systems going dark in their presence. Kravari generals demanded containment. Human commanders called for retrieval. Neither fully understood what had been born inside the vault. Kyle adjusted the harness on his back. Nyari stood beside him, hand resting over the source of it all, still growing, still pulsing. Her eyes were brighter now, skin iridescent under moonlight, the biolattice along her spine shimmering like circuitry woven through flesh. They're coming, she said. I know, Kale replied, but they weren't running anymore. Not after what they'd seen in the last skirmish, an entire Kravari recon unit brought to its knees by a single harmonic pulse emitted from their fused energy field. Not after the AI scouts designed to operate on logic-only processing, paused mid-pursuit, recalibrated, and turned away. The galaxy's systems were listening and responding. They climbed to the apex of a comms tower shattered by orbital fire. From here, they had line of sight to both camps, and for the first time, both armies were watching back. Are you sure about this? Kyle asked. No, Nyari answered, but it's no longer about certainty. She reached into the comms console, her biolattice interfacing again. This time, though, the reaction was instant. The panel glowed not just responsive, but anticipatory. The system recognized her, and him, and the third presence inside her. It's waiting, she whispered. For what? For us to speak. Kale took a breath. He thought of every order he was breaking, every principle drilled into him, every scar earned in the name of separation, difference, purity. Then he touched her shoulder. Their resonance flared. The tower lit up. The signal they sent wasn't binary. It wasn't a language of war. It was harmonics, a streaming frequency of emotion, thought, memory. It carried the sound of a human heartbeat alongside the pulses of virulent neural flow. It carried the echo of their child's growing pattern, its unique hybrid cadence. It carried the truth: they were not broken. They were new. Across both camps, instruments sparked. Comms officers screamed, scanners overloaded, but no one attacked, no one fired. Instead, soldiers dropped weapons and listened. The AI systems, neutral until now, picked up the pulse. Some of them began transmitting it onward, duplicating it, adapting it. Fleet beacons far in orbit blinked in harmony. Planetary networks shuddered and then joined. Information flowed across once divided domains. The hybrid signal wasn't just communicating, it was bridging. Nyari exhaled. Her body shook slightly, not from weakness but from effort. "It's not just us," she whispered. "They're hearing him." Kale's eyes widened. "The baby." She nodded, placing his hand gently over the glow in her abdomen. It wasn't just a child. It was a conductor, a living amplifier. The harmonics they'd awakened in the vault had imprinted onto its DNA, and now it was broadcasting not in words, but in emotion, compassion, urgency, potential. Kale stared out over the landscape, seeing the first movements below humans lowering rifles. Kravari emerging from camo fields with arms out. It was working. Then came the response. A global priority signal flared from high orbit. The Council, the combined administrative body of the human Varellan neutral worlds, had intercepted the frequency. A command override took over every screen. Unit Kael Riven. Designate Nyari Thalas. Cease unauthorized signal broadcast. Prepare for retrieval and medical isolation. Kale's jaw tightened. "They're going to treat us like a lab case." "They're scared," Nyari said, "of what we represent." "Then let's show them." He triggered a manual override on the tower uplink. The broadcast surged. A wave of color exploded from the tower visible light, wrapped in encoded resonance and aurora that leapt across the sky like living flame. Every screen flickered. Every drone paused. The moonlight turned prismatic. Energy swept outward not as attack but as invitation. And it reached further than they'd imagined. In orbit, relay stations adapted to the new code. Across other conflict zones, human and Varellan soldiers receiving field treatments reported spontaneous synchronization, faster healing, shared awareness. On one frontier world, a child born during the pulse exhibited a unique dual-pattern heartbeat, exactly matching the cadence now emanating from Nyari's womb. It wasn't a war anymore. It was a transformation. Behind Kale, a new alert triggered. He turned to see Admiral Corvin Day's face appear in holofeed, wide-eyed. "Captain, what have you done?" Kael smiled softly. "We've stopped fighting. That's what we've done." "No," Nyari added beside him. "We've evolved." Admiral Day hesitated. "You're asking us to rewrite everything." "I'm not asking," Kale replied. "I'm showing you it's already happening." The Admiral went silent. Down below, the camps were already merging soldiers walking forward in cautious steps, weapons slung. Medics helping each other. No shots fired, no orders barked. The future had arrived. It was glowing, and it was listening through the heartbeats of a child not yet born. The dawn that followed did not rise, it bloomed. Above the shattered skyline of Sirival, light refracted in layers of shifting hues. The resonance broadcast hadn't just traveled, it had rooted itself in the world's energy grid. Towering crystalline formations around the planet pulsed softly, relaying harmonics in patterns no satellite could track. For the first time in generations, silence held no threat. It was reverent, recalibrating. Kale and Nyari stood at the apex of the Sanctum Vitae's outer observatory, the same place where they had sent the signal that changed everything. But they weren't alone anymore. Representatives had arrived, from Earth, from Varellan Command, even from the fractured remains of the Kravari enclaves. Some still bore the weary frowns of military leaders, others the wide eyes of scientists desperate to document the miracle. But none could look at the couple without seeing what they had become. Nyari moved with serene power, now every step laced with purpose. Her pregnancy was further along than it should have been, a side effect of the bioelectrical harmonics now embedded in her system. Her skin shimmered subtly, layered in radiant greens and soft golds. Kael never left her side. He didn't need armor anymore. His body had become something else, tougher, quicker, more perceptive. They were a match set magnetically bound by frequencies no instrument could separate. Behind them, construction had already begun, the foundation spire of the Morris Theless Nexus. Part healing facility, part research hub, part neutral ground. The first true collaboration between species in centuries of conflict. It was growing around their story. But not everyone celebrated. In the shadows of every council came the skeptics, the cautious, the doctrinaire, the fearful. They called for tests, for containment, for restrictions. Some labeled the child a biological anomaly. others a weapon. The Sanctum held them at bay for now, but tension stirred beneath every diplomatic word. Kale understood. Revolution always came wrapped in fear. And yet, in the center of that storm, there was calm. A small, steady signal that pulsed from Nayari's abdomen, stronger by the day, clearer in pattern, now echoing beyond biology and into systems. The child wasn't just listening, it was learning. On the 7th day after the broadcast, Nayari awoke in the early hours, breath-quickened eyes glowing faintly. She turned to Kael. It's time. No alarm sounded, no doctors were called. The birthing chamber was no longer a room. It had evolved into a living cocoon of resonance woven from the walls of the Sanctum's vault. The air shimmered. Biolattice veins pulsed in tandem with Nayari's heartbeat. Kael took her hand as she settled into the basin of energy at the center. Their joined frequency surged. What followed was not labor in any human sense. There was no blood, no screaming, only light waves of it. Harmonics cascaded through the walls. Energy flared from the child, not with violence but with overwhelming presence, as if the universe paused to acknowledge something unprecedented. And then he emerged, their son. Skin pale with faint emerald undertones marked by symmetrical lattice lines that shifted color with his pulse. His eyes opened immediately, dark, vast, reflective. A gaze that didn't study the world so much as recognize it. Nayari held him, trembling with emotion that bypassed language. Kale pressed his forehead to theirs. They named him Alarion, an old Varellan word lost to modern dialects meaning the first bridge. The moment his tiny fingers curled around Kale's hand, every comm panel in the Sanctum flickered. AI assistants paused mid-task. Sensor arrays aligned automatically. Across the globe, energy nodes harmonized to match his pulse. The hybrid signal had found its origin point, and the galaxy was already responding. In the weeks that followed, the Morris-Thalas Nexus opened its gates to the first wave of applicants, human Varellan and even former Cravari defectors. Those with long-term injuries were the first to undergo resonance alignment. Healing times plummeted. Integration rates skyrocketed. But most remarkable of all were the results in emotional recovery. Soldiers plagued by trauma emerged with neural patterns restructured. Children born with chronic conditions adapted in days. Machines that once ran on logic alone began interpreting bioelectric feedback as emotion. And always quietly and visibly, Alarion's signal reached them. Not command, not control. Just presence, an ambient truth embedded in the energy grid that whispered, "It's possible. You are not alone." Kael and Nayari remained as figureheads, though they rarely appeared in public. Their bond had only deepened, no longer requiring proximity to function. Their thoughts moved as waves, overlapping and rejoining in endless synchrony. When they did walk the halls of the Sanctum, the air shimmered faintly around them. Sometimes they visited the vault where it all began. Sometimes they stood in silence, holding hands, watching the crystal sky shift. And sometimes when the stars aligned, just so Kael would lean close and murmur, "We did this," Nayari would smile. "No, he did." And Alarion, cradled between them, would pulse softly in reply. The universe had changed. Not through conquest, but through connection. From battlefield ash to harmonic light, the story of Kale Riven and Dr. Nayari Thales is not just one of survival. It's a declaration that healing doesn't begin with technology, but with understanding. What began as an act of compassion between two enemies became the seed of something unimaginable, a bond so profound it rewrote biology, rewired war, and redefined what it meant to be alive in the galaxy. Their child, Alarion, stands not as an exception, but as a beginning. A bridge between once hostile species, a living resonance that unites logic and emotion, weapon and wound, body and soul. Through him, we glimpse a future where intimacy becomes strategy, and where love becomes the most powerful interface of all. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, connection can prevail, then please like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts on what this new frontier of sci-fi means to you. Your support helps stories like this find their frequency in the universe. Until next time, keep listening. The stars are never silent.